61, 60, 63, 62. It doesn't matter. Good. Is it clear, this task? Clear all our manipulations, all our actions. Is it clear? If you have any questions, certainly you can ask me your questions. And I'll try to answer our questions. And now our paper number 2. Let's open our paper number 2. And let's start on a very simple task. You have been asked to do a discounted cash flow valuation, our classical model, discounted cash flow valuation of a firm, and given the following partial inputs to the valuation. The firm has a tax rate of 40%. Estimate the value of the firm today. In other words, we have to find our value based on our discounted cash flow valuation, based on our discounted model. And first of all, as about the recommendations for our discounted cash flow valuation, we have to calculate our free cash flows, and then we have to discount our free cash flows, and we'll receive our value. We'll receive our value during the explicit forecast period, then plus our terminal value, and we'll find our total value in this context. And we have growth rate. We have EBIT minus tax. In other words, it will be NOPAT. Let's only copy the meanings of our NOPAT. Our NOPAT 100, 120, 144, 151.2. Our NOPAT, or our EBIT, multiply 1 minus t. Then, as I'm going to find, as I'm going in finding our free cash flows, so let's calculate our reinvestment rate. Could you make me recommendations? Could you form the recommendations of finding our reinvestment rate? How could we find our reinvestment rate? Using which formula could we find our reinvestment rate? Dear colleagues, how could we find our reinvestment rate? Dear colleagues, how could we find our reinvestment rate? How do you think? We possess the following information: our growth rate, our return on capital. And so why our well-known formula, according which our growth rate equals return on capital multiplied reinvestment rate. So why our reinvestment rate equals our growth rate 0.2 divided on our return on capital 0.25. Our growth rate divided by our return on capital 25. 0.8 reinvestment rate for the first, for the second, and for the third variant. And as about the fourth variant, growth rate equals 0.5, 5%. Return on capital equals 15%. So why 5% divided by our return on capital divided 0.15%? 0.15%. It will be 33%. Reinvestment rate 33%. Now we can calculate our investments. How could we calculate our investments? Could you propose your solution? Could you propose your mechanism of finding our investments in the context of this task? How could we find our investments in the context of this task? Yeah, of course. How could we calculate our investments in this context? As we have received our NOPAT and we have received our reinvestment rate, so Y our investments equals our NOPAT, this category equals our NOPAT multiplied reinvestment rate. It will be our investments. It will be the mechanism of calculation our investments. And now, if we reduce our investments from our NOPAT, we'll receive our free cash flow. So why free cash flow? This category equals our NOPAT minus our investments as the reflection of our operating activities, our operating cash flow minus our investments. Operating cash flow minus our investments. 20 in the first scenario, 24 in the second scenario, 28.8 in the third scenario, and 100.8 in the fourth scenario. And now let's calculate our WACC, our weighted average capital cost. Very simple formula of our WACC. Our WACC can be found as our cost of equity for the first scenario, 0.15 cost of equity, multiply cost of equity, multiply the weight of our equity, and as the weight of our equity, we have debt ratio 10% of debt, and so why 90% of equity. 0.15 multiply 0.9 as the weight of our equity, plus the cost of debt 7%, multiply the weight of our debt 10%, multiply 10% the weight of our debt, and multiply 1 minus tax, 1 minus 0.14, 1 minus 40%. It will be 13.92 weighted average capital cost for the first scenario. 13.92. For the second scenario, cost of equity became 14.5. So why? That's correct. 14.5. The weight of our equity became 80%. And the weight of our debt became 20%. The weight of our equity became 80%. And the cost of our capital, total cost of our capital became 12.44%. For the third scenario, 14% cost of our equity, 14% cost of our equity. The weight of our debt became 30%. So why? In this context, it will be 0.7, and in this context, it will be 0.3. 7.3. 11.06, the cost of our capital, total capital. And the last parameter, debt ratio 40%. So why in this context, cost of equity became 12.5%. The weight of our equity became 60%. the weight of our debt became 40%. And our WACC in the fourth period, in the fourth year, became 9.18%. 9.18%. Good. And now we can calculate 1 plus WACC. 1 plus WACC. Very simple manipulation, but this manipulation will help us in our future research. It will be 1 plus our WACC. 1 plus our WACC. 1 plus our WACC. Good. And now I have calculated free cash flow. I have calculated our WACC. Now, for realizing, for proposing our discounted cash flow model and practice, we have to calculate our terminal value. Our terminal value, the terminal equals, our terminal value equals, how could we calculate our terminal value? How could we find our terminal value according to the conditions of this task? What are your proposals? How could we find our terminal value in the context of this task?
Should we use our free cash flow
Look.
and WACC probably?
And how could we use our free cash flow? Our free cash flow of the last year multiply by what? Free cash flow.
The growth.
1 plus growth, exactly. 1 plus our expected growth, 5%. Good. 1 plus 5% divided our cost of capital minus growth, minus 5%. And who did propose the mechanism? Unfortunately, I did not notice.
It was Ministry.
Anastasia. Okay. That's it. Good. And now I have found it. Terminal value, our terminal value, and now I'm ready to find our total value, Now I'm ready to find our total value. As about our total value, it will be our total value, it will be our free cash flow divided 1 plus WACC. But unfortunately, in this case, we have a great variety of our discount factors. And so why, previously, we summarized 1 plus our discount factors to simplify our task. It will be free cash flow divided 1 plus WACC. Plus free cash flow for the second year divided 1 plus first rate multiply 1 plus the second rate, plus our free cash flow of the third period divided 1 plus first rate multiply 1 plus second rate multiply 1 plus third rate. In other words, 1 plus rate the first multiply 1 plus rate the second, multiply 1 plus rate the third. And plus free cash flows of the fourth period divided the same, 1 plus the first rate, multiply the second discount factor, multiply the third discount factor, and the fourth discount factor. Good. And now plus our terminal value. Our terminal value must be divided on the concentration of all discount factors. the same divided by 4 discount parameters in this context. And total value of our company equals 1,751 or 1,752, it depends on you. Good. As about the next two questions, please train to find the solution for these cases at home. It's your short homework, and our next lecture, I'll start on proposing the solution of these two tasks. Be very attentive with the last question. And this question, we have to use our Black-Scholes model. And in other words, our capital, our earning, our capital of the company equals our total value minus our debt. And on the statement, the total solution of this task will be built. Our earning equal, this meaning equals to our total value minus our debt. But certainly in our lecture, we'll find the solution for this task. Good. And